Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back for another episode of Form Check Friday. We're burning through these things. As of this form check, we are up to, I believe, early March now, March 4th. So we're making our way back to present time. We should be catching up with these soon. And that's one of the reasons we've continued to do these while we've taken some time to kind of work on some other projects, which you will be seeing at least a sneak peek of this coming week. Getting right into Form Check Friday. This first one comes from a guy named Seth Morrison. Seth is he didn't say in this email, but he did say, I think before he works, or he's training on a collegiate team. He sent in some video of some equipped lifting previously. This is a raw deadlift from him, and he's wondering if we have any tips for him. So his back's actually looking pretty rounded over in this. I think this was a 45-pound PR or something absurd like that, so it's not unusual to see some form breakdown. But what I would do is I would try to program in some work that's going to help you get strong off the floor and try to maintain that back a little bit better. I talk a lot about maintaining back angle, turning your lats on, all that good kind of stuff, but I'm going to emphasize more to do some pause deadlifts and to do maybe some deficit deadlifts here, Seth. I think working those into your programming will help you get a little bit stronger off the floor and help you better maintain your back angle and your positioning off of the floor. That seems to be the biggest issue there, is just staying in the position you put yourself in. So let's try and program in some things that are going to attack those weaknesses and help achieve that. This next video comes to us from Mustafa, and he is doing some sumo deadlifts. He's got his straps on here. So the biggest thing I'm seeing with Mustafa is he's having an issue setting tension into the bar. So one of the things I want you to try to do, he mentioned in his email that he specifically wants to try and get faster off the floor. I would say try and avoid that way of thinking. Try not being fast, but try instead emphasizing being smooth off of the floor, because it looks like you're setting some tension into the bar and then you're going to like jerk it off the floor and you're losing all the tension you're setting. What I want you to do is try and be smoother, so when you set tension, that's the same position you're starting from. You can see in most of these deadlifts, you're gonna set tension and then your hips come up, the knees come in a little bit as you try to like really speed it up off the floor. But that intention of being super speedy is actually sabotaging you and making you slower. If you can make it smooth and make it consistent off the floor, that's going to actually probably make it a little bit faster. So let's focus on setting tension into the bar and keeping that tension as your starting point for the deadlift. If that means your hips start a little bit higher, that's totally fine, but let's try and set tension and then pull from that exact position without loosening and then trying to jerk into the bar like that. That's probably the biggest thing, Mustafa. This next one comes from Ashton. We've got some squats here. And Ashton says he has some issues with his knees caving in. Now, if you look really closely at this second video, you can see that as he descends into the bottom, almost as soon as he starts his descent, we see that sort of ankle roll in where the feet are flattening out, and that's gonna cause a lot of pressure tending towards that valgus knee crash. So the biggest thing I want you to focus on there is trying to maintain some arch in your feet, trying to use, Mark Bell often talks about imagining you're on dinner plates and rotating out, especially through the feet, and I think that that cue might help you a fair bit. The other thing I wouldn't mind seeing you try is either a heeled lifting shoe or putting some plates underneath your heels, because it looks like in the first video where we can see more of a side angle, that it might be good for you to get a little bit more knee travel forward for you to get a bit better depth, because it looks like we're pretty on the line with depth, and it also looks like we're having a hard time staying in position into the bottom. So let's try out some heels maybe, but definitely work on trying to get your feet set a little bit better, contracting the arch of the foot like you're grabbing the floor between the ball and pinky of your foot and the heel of your foot, contracting inwards like this. And let's try the heels and see how that goes. The next video we have is from Najib. Again, this is gonna be some squats, and he says he has some issues with his hips shooting up. And I don't think that it's necessarily a technical issue, but what I want you to try and do, again, we're gonna talk a little bit about some movements that you can program to help you work on staying upright, keeping those knees forward, and using your quads better out of the bottom. This is something that I've cued people on multiple times in our Form Check Fridays, but here's some movements that we can use to try and cultivate that technique a little bit more. We can look at doing some high bar squats where you're forced to stay a little bit more upright and get a little bit more knee travel. We can look at doing some pin squats or pause squats to work on how we're coming out of that bottom position and maintaining tension into and out of the bottom position without losing it as we sort of change directions in the bottom. The other thing we can do is a safety bar squat, which is going to closely simulate a high bar squat, or we can do front squats, which again is gonna force you to stay very, very upright. If we get too much forward lean, obviously that bar is gonna roll off your shoulders. So let's try incorporating some of those movements, Najib, and let's see if those can help you over time. A lot of this stuff that we talk about is going to take some time to cultivate new technique. As well, we can assist that by using some of these supplementary movements to reinforce that technique and to teach you sort of how it feels to, you know, be more upright in the squat, for example, or to make sure that your hips don't shoot out back out of the bottom. So let's try those movements, Najib, and see if that helps you out. All right, so next up, again, some squats. This time from Desmond, and he's from Singapore, which is kind of cool. And pretty much the exact same thing we were saying to Ashton there. You can see his knees sort of stop at a certain part in the bottom, which forces his hips back further, and you can see that little bit of rounding in his low back. So one thing that I want you to try is I want you to try a heeled lifting shoe, or just stretching the crap out of your calves, or cueing your knees forward. But essentially what I want to see is a little bit more forward knee travel so you can stay a little bit more upright and put that, that sort of lumbo-pelvic joint under a little bit less flexion demand so we can make sure we're able to hit depth without seeing that rounding in the low back. That's going to lead to a little bit of a tipping forward more than you're probably comfortable with in the upper back. So biggest thing there, ankle mobility, or try some heeled lifting shoes. Reference back earlier in the video to Ashton's squat, and you can see a lot of the same things happening there. Next up, we have a couple of videos from Lithuania, from a guy named Gilbertas. And he's doing some squats here, and the squats actually look really good. What we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about his deadlifts. So there's a couple of things that I'm noticing in your deadlifts here, Gilbertas. If I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. But what we're seeing is we're seeing you dip almost a little bit too low, I think. What I'd like you to try and think about in your deadlift setup the next couple of times, or maybe play with this just as a cue, but try to get your knees back behind the bar a little bit. This is gonna raise your hips slightly, but it should also allow you to get a more neutral spine position. And I think your shoulders currently are a little bit behind the bar, so it's gonna put your shoulders directly above the bar where we'll get that nice sort of line of pull right up the front of the body. So biggest thing, pack yourself back behind the bar a little bit more by shifting your knees back, shifting the weight back to your heels a little bit more, allowing your hips to rise and getting a more neutral spine. One more thing I want you to try to look at is getting a little bit of external rotation from the hip. So like we were talking about earlier, dinner plate idea, whether you want to think about that or pushing your knees out directly. In either way, it looks like we're getting a little bit of knee collapse, which is causing you to kind of list forward and getting out in front of the bar. So we go from being behind the bar to a little bit in front of the bar, where what I'd like to see is a nice neutral back and shoulder blades staying above the bar the whole way up. So let's try those couple of cues, and I hope that helps your starting position, Gilbertas. Next up, we have one from Jordan Archer. He actually sent in a couple of videos, and he's from here in Alberta, just up north. So let's take a look at his bench first off. Now, he said that he was told to cue tucking his elbows, and it looks like that's exactly what he's doing, I think, to a flaw. So it looks like we're getting over tucked out in front of the bar with the elbows, where I think we should be thinking about tucking the shoulders and letting the elbows flare out and remain stacked underneath the bar. So I want you to maintain that same tension in your shoulder and in your upper back when you're benching, but I want you to try and get the elbow out so it's straight up and down from that bar. I think that's gonna give you a lot better bottom position and keep you away from some potential tendonitis. Next up, we'll look at his deadlift. So Jordan, when we look at your deadlift here, we're seeing a very sort of traditional, just lack of extension in the back. As we start to pull, the back goes from mostly neutral to completely not neutral. What I want you to do, and actually this might be weird, this might be a bit of a weird suggestion, but I want you to try pulling sumo for a while. I think given your leverages and given the way that you pull, getting some experience in sumo might allow you to kind of figure out what it feels like to maintain a neutral posture while pushing through a deadlift movement. I've had a number of clients who have actually transitioned to sumo and then back to conventional after taking some of the cues and some of the body awareness that we can learn from pulling sumo and applying that back to their conventional deadlift. So I think that might be a very valuable thing for you to explore, sumo deadlifting, to help carry over to your conventional deadlift and get us doing a better conventional deadlift. Essentially, we really need to work on keeping that back flatter, and I think sumo might be a good way to cue us to do that. And last but not least, we're gonna look at Jordan's squat here. So Jordan, it looks like you have a really good squat. For the most part, I don't see a whole lot wrong with it. One thing I would try to do is I would try to widen your stance just a tiny bit. It looks like you're getting to sort of the very end range of motion with your ankle mobility. You can see your heels kind of lift up towards the bottom. So I would work on wide, I'd go maybe 1 to 2 inches wider in your stance. That should allow you to stay a little bit more over your midfoot instead of rocking forward on the toes. To do a more upright close stance squat like that requires a fair bit of ankle mobility and a fair bit of forward knee travel. That might work really well for some people, but what I want you to try is I want you to try actually widening a little bit and just keeping those feet nice and flat on the ground. The other thing I want you to really focus on, because I'm seeing it start to happen in a couple reps, is I'm seeing you start to kind of give out in the upper back as you hit the bottom position. So let's really try and focus on pulling that bar into the back, squeezing those shoulder blades together and making a good solid shelf for that bar, and especially focusing on keeping that tight as you hit the bottom position and change directions out of the hole. Anyways, guys, that's it for Form Check Friday. Like I said, we're catching up right now. So if you guys want to get your videos in, it's calgarybarbell2@gmail.com. Because we're catching up, it's going to be shorter wait time for you to get your video reviewed or to get an email back from me. So please go ahead and do that. If you guys have any more questions, ask us below, leave a like on the video, and we will see you next Friday. On another note, coming soon, we are going to be doing some training footage leading up to my next Raw Meet War of the West, which is going to be on May Long weekend. So expect some training footage next week, and also expect, like I said earlier, a teaser or a trailer for our new series, So You Want to Be a Powerlifter. That is going to detail in incredible detail everything that somebody would need to know for their first powerlifting meet. So we're gonna go through federations, we're gonna go through training standards, we're gonna go through competition day, we're gonna go through absolutely everything somebody would need to know to go from Joe 225 to the first time on the platform. So I really hope that's gonna be an awesome resource. It's something we've been pouring a ton of work into. We hope you guys appreciate that and the fact that we've had to take a back seat on some of the other stuff to really get through that. But it will be coming soon, and expect lots of really cool and exciting things coming up next week.